The title of this talk is taking the stress out of working from home. So the whole idea is to sort of, start as we need to go on and make this chat as stress-free as possible for everybody if we possibly can. So I said, relax, take it easy, and learn what you can. If it's something you find that will work for you, brilliant. If not, not a bother. So firstly, this can be hard, and it is a step-by-step process, and everyone's starting from a different baseline. So in order so that absolutely everybody can get something out of it, there is follow-on support after this talk that if you want to get it. So we, as usual, there's a discussion group linked to my lifestyle talks, and that includes everything from sort of like defining your business ideas, talks I do, to how you sort of set things up, to interview tips, to social media, whatever sort of area they cover, including this one. So you can go on to Facebook, use that code LIB 2021. That's set up and live till the end of this year. So even if you're looking at the repeat of this online, it'll still work for you. So I'm going to send this out in the chat. And to everybody watching the recordings of this in the future, either the near distant future or the far distant future, hello to the future. The copy that I'll be sending onto the library to add to the library talks will have all these links as well. So don't worry about trying to write them down as we talk about it. It should all be there. Okay, and the main aim of this talk is that we're all going to try and aim at the end to have a change in your mindset. And you're going to try and start working from home, if you are, and stop the situation of where you find yourself living at your place of work. And that is something which has been increased a lot over the last few months. But as somebody who for the past decade has worked from home and made it a point of setting up my office in the house, that's not the way you normally work from home. It's completely unusual for the last year or so. So, don't worry about that. So first of all, a quick word from our sponsors. So this is a Work Matters related webinar organized by Leitrim Library Service. So Work Matters is a library, it's an initiative supporting business startups, job seeking or career changes. And the library itself has got some great resources to support the Work Matters initiative that you can find online with your library card. So if you don't have a library card, it's no problem to get one. It's very easy. You simply log on to Leitrim Library Services at www.leitrimcoco.com/community culture library join, and you'll be given a temporary card and pin. So everybody get that URL? Yeah, great. leitrimcoco.community culture library join. Perfect. Great stuff. I'll pop it into the chat as well so you have it in case you need it. And you'll also get a copy of this pin as well if you're watching the recording. Seriously, the library service is absolutely brilliant, no matter where. I was first starting out my career back at the end of the early 90s, shall we say, to be polite, not last 1990s. The libraries was the place to go. Google seems to be the first port of call for a lot of people, but basically you don't get as much information as you can by going to a library, getting a book that's been written by somebody who's put the time, thought, and brain power into organizing material and information into a succinct way. You don't get that from Google very easily. Also, with the library, you can actually choose electronic books and audiobooks using BorrowBox. And there's also a collection of business books that you might want to try and dip into as well. And you can read the latest health and fitness magazines online with your RBD digital and press reader. So that link will give you pretty much access to the online services as well. So you'll physically have to go in to the building. And lastly, you can even take some online courses with the Universal Class. So that's like Microsoft applications like Word, Windows, Windows 10, Excel. And again, if you go to the very simple to remember URL, okay, so memorize it easy, leitrimcoco.eng.community/culture library join, you'll be able to get access to it. Or if you go to leitrimcoco./eng community culture library, your online library, you'll get it there as well. Made a note of that? Great stuff, lovely. If you haven't been that fast with the writing, it's in the chat function, so you can get a copy there again. And lastly, if you require any help, because not everybody would be, there's no point in going to try and take a course on Microsoft and computers if you've got difficulty logging on in the first place. If you require any help or stuck, there's a phone number 071 964 5582 or email leitrimlibrary@leitrimcoco.ie. And again, it's in the chat function for you there as well. You can have a look at that later on. So That's everything you need basically to try and get further information from the library services from there. So that's it. And encourage, if you have not been using the library's services to the fullest, or you're not fully aware of what's there, it is worth spending an hour or two diving in to see what's available, because it can really, really help you out. So now on to the main feature, which is taking the stress out of working from home. So basically, we're going to cover a few little areas here in this agenda. First of all, we're going to quickly discuss what's changing, because you have to know the background and the environment in order to make it work, because that will help your stress levels by knowing where things are and what you can and can't expect to do or need to do, and what the general gestalt of the work situation in the country and the worldwide is moving to. The two types of work from homer, as I dub them, some pitfalls that people fall into, and then some tips and good practices of how to get the best from working from home. And then also in the Facebook group as well, those best practices are broken down to like a 30-day challenge, so that if you want to and you think it's something that might help and you work best with that sort of structure, you can take the challenges and do them piecemeal as you see fit. Is that okay to everybody so far? Yeah, great stuff. So first of all, what's changing? Well, apart from the elephant in the room, which is COVID, basically, Ireland has announced this thing called the National Remote Work Strategy. Now, the elephant that we talk about has really only hastened this change. It's not a case that everything wasn't going there anyway. It's just basically squeezed what would have probably happened in the next 10, 15 years naturally into a more urgent scenario. So COVID has sort of refocused lots of people's and organizations' viewpoint about having to work from home. Now, again, as I said a little earlier, I've been working from home for a long time. What we were going through, and we're still going through in many cases with working from home due to COVID, is not normal when you're working from your own home. For one thing, if you have a lunchtime and you want to go out to a cafe for, nip out for something in the cafe for lunch, you don't have the option anymore. You're all stuck in your house. And also there's lots of other things going on like homeschooling or Zoom calls, or, it's just a completely different pandemic world we're in at the moment. So if it's something that you were thinking, oh yeah, I'd hate this working from home, Lark, I want to try and get a few tips to make it easier here, just remember, this has not been the norm. So from a bigger viewpoint, I'm taking the side that COVID just speeded up or sped up things that were going to happen anyway, because that's where the trends were. Some work done by LinkedIn. They do it at the end of each year. So this is the latest one from 2020 to 2021. They're basically saying that the hottest jobs, the trendiest jobs for 2021 can be done remotely. And it's sort of, their prediction is there's 150 million new tech jobs in the next 5 years, and that 84% of employers plan to expand remote working. Okay, so the last line is the one I want you to be taking a note of, which is the digital revolution can mean a career change for many. And I'm going to address this now, so we can just sort of marinate in people's minds, because change can be scary, and the only difference is unplanned change or change you're not in control of is the scary part. If you got a phone call in the morning saying that you had you got a lottery ticket and you'd won the lottery for 3 million, that's a surprise, that's a change, but it's a positive one, and you wouldn't be so worried about it. End of the day, most of the time people have change, it's that they're not really in control of it, and that causes problems. So first thing is, most people on this call now, depending on what you're working in, on your type of industry, if you take any 100 people given, a lot of them will not be in the same job in 5 years due to technology or work changes. This is not choosing to go and take a new role, or choosing to go and retrain, or choosing to do something else. It's that your job will not be done in the same way due to technology, and that'll either be because it's been supplanted by technology and you've had to move up the value chain, or it's been eliminated by technology, or it's simply that technology will allow you to do your job in a much different way and your focus has changed accordingly. About I think it was mid 95, 96, I think it was, I attended a talk by a futurologist. I worked for a tech company at the time, and his job was he was employed globally to sort of plan out what way the technology trends are going to be going, and so that they could sort of think a few years ahead, a few decades ahead. So he was basically sort of sharing some information from his research that, the 9 to 5 trend we're all used to is really only something that's happened in the last 70, 80 years or so. Very much industrial revolution change brought this around. Before that, the vast majority of people lived where they worked. So we're essentially returning to an approach that humans have basically handled and done for generations. But it's obviously not going to be it'll be a different world. You won't be the local blacksmith just serving your community. You'll be still a specialist doing something that can be done virtually anywhere. But we've lost, unfortunately, the generational skills to handle it. For example, I used to have an uncle who's long passed away who used to use the phrase second sleep every day, and his generation would have known what that means. Nowadays, you have to Google what it was, because it's not gone out of vernacular. And the same thing, a lot of things that people would have just naturally taken for granted have dropped out of how we do things over the last few years or last few generations. So whereas your maybe great grandparents would have had no problem managing things and working near their place of work, living near their place of work, apologies, we find it a bit of a challenge because we've lost those sort of coping skills. So bear that in mind. This is not a case that it's something that'll be very hard to learn. It's going to be something that you can sort of easily try and relearn and recapture. Farmers, for example, are quite a good exception to this. They've consistently, apart from talking to large industrial styles farming, especially in Ireland, most farmers live near their place of work as well, and they balance the lifestyle out. So just have that at the back of your mind. There's some challenges, some opportunities. Just be aware that it's there. And the main thing is, like with evolution, it's going to be the survival of the most adaptable. So basically, what that means from right now is the opportunity is going to be taking advantage of those who are most motivated now to make some changes. So the fact you're on this call, great. There may be some things to think about that you have afterwards, and that's good. But this is sort of something that's coming down the line quite fast. So retraining, cross-training, taking chances on new skills, not being afraid to embrace change, basically, will make the difference. And it always has made a difference. But for the first time, due to the sort of elephant in the room of COVID, the way has been a little bit made more clear now as to what organizations, what governments have to do to try and future-proof the economy and future-proof work going forward. So there's going to be a lot of changes coming on the line, work-wise. It may directly or indirectly affect your industry, but you can either embrace it, which is fine, or you can sort of try and fight it and want things to stay where they are, which historically has never been a very good option to take. So it's a matter of just trying to be comfortable as much as you can with any changes coming down the line. And again, bear in mind the fact that you may not be doing the job in the same way again in the next 10 years, and just be happy with that and try and see what you can get out of it. So what's the big changes, first of all? Well, the first one is that shortly, it was in progress as part of the National Broadband Plan and future-proofing things anyway, but it launched a few months after COVID hit, which is the National Remote Work Strategy. Has everybody here heard of that, or at least seen something on it in the past? Or so? Yeah, great. Some no. So the basic approach is that they're suggesting that increased remote working has the potential to fundamentally change the nature of where, how, when, why people work. And then the other thing I took from the document, it's nice reading if you want to go and spend some time reading it. If you like reading or you've insomnia or something, it's like most sort of publications of that is quite good. Have to download the PDF and read it to knock yourself out. But the thing that I came out with that from the future they're envisaging is that they're expecting to bring about some sort of economic, spatial, environmental, cultural, and societal change that is likely to result in consequences we're not presently able to envisage. In a nutshell, they don't know what's going to happen. They're just going to try and set things up and see where things go. So what? Well, the where, how, when, and why part, we're going to get to. But knowing that at governmental level, there's a plan there to try and help remote work strategy on a national level will help you get access to some of the things you might need from your employer to make things easier for you in the long run working from home. So we need to spend a few minutes getting to know the bare bones of what this means for you and what's in the document, so it'll help you level set when it comes to making life easier for you working from home as to what way the wind is blowing. It's easier to swim with the tide basically than it is sort of swim against the tide. So the first of the three pillars is create a conducive environment for the adoption of remote working. Basically there it's you know, you can work from home and you might have a job you can physically do from home, but if your employer, if your corporation you work with says no bloody way, your chances of it are very much slim. So the approach is try and make a conducive environment, for the adoption of remote working. Now they have set a target of starting off with 20% of public servants working from home routinely as a starting point, and then to expand that. There's light on details of how to implement that. But I know, for example, in the healthcare sector, a lot of people are delivering services remotely. There's some jobs you cannot physically not do unless you're out there. For example, if you're a telecoms engineer, you can't remote go and work from home to try and go in and physically exchange a transmission box on a pole in the middle of Offaly somewhere. You have to go out there in your Land Rover and do it. So there's some jobs you can, some jobs you can't. They haven't gone into lots of details as far as I'm aware yet as to how that will be split out. It's left naturally, but the approach is to have 20% work from home as day-to-day in the public service. Secondly, developing and leveraging remote work infrastructure to support adoption of working remotely. Like the National Broadband Plan is part of that. The announcement on Monday, the Our Rural Future announcement, is quite an interesting development on that. Again, that was a little bit light on details, but the fact of trying to sort of want to build 400 work from home remote work hubs around the country is a good sign. The bad sign, obviously, is the slight increase in the cost of housing rurally, as well as people want to try and go back to counties they would have grew up in, etc., because they have a chance. But it's there, and we're looking at it. And then lastly, build a remote work framework that can maximize the benefits of working remotely. That's great. Again, that will be down to sort of structures that a governmental level can put in to help and incentivize working from home. If you have a very technology or old school employer, it'd be very hard to sway them. Tax incentives is a very good way that governmentally they can change the temperature of the water that a business works in to swing towards a particular area. So we'll have to see how they come up with that and what plans are. But that's generally their approach that they're going for. So some of the steps, again, work from home and remote work should be 20% of public sector, treatment of working with tax expenditure in the budget, remote working hubs, request. Now, the fourth one here is legislating the right to request remote working, the code of practice for the right to disconnect. And the last one is really as our control, but it's high-speed broadband, etc. But the fourth and fifth are the ones that we will focus on for the purpose of the rest of this talk, because knowing that you have the right to request remote working, as legislation has been drafted maybe by the end of the year, but the sheer fact that legally the law has your back if you want to request to work from home, and you can do your job just as well or maybe better from home, that's a big thing to have behind you that you didn't have before. The code of practice for the right to disconnect, that is a second big thing that's really good to know is there, because as we get to some of the pitfalls, being able to switch off is a problem that a lot of people have when they work from home a lot. So there's two things that's changing the temperature of the water that we all work in that will help for those who may want to work from home. So again, this is for your own use. The document, a home office, refers to a work or office space set at a person's home and used exclusively for business on a regular basis. So, we're going to assume for this that work from home is where people want to do, but remote working can be getting in your car or walking down to your local village or in the town you're living in to a centralized place, swiping in with your little with your badge into the area that's there for you and logging in and working there. So you get the benefit of a local office, when we can sort of, share a canteen again, etc. Those days, whenever they return, you get the benefit of being in an environment, but also you're not having to get stuck in traffic for ages to get somewhere. So the most important one to get our head around starting off is the why, because the concept that's going to fundamentally change the nature of where, how, when, and why people work is great, but the part that everybody on this call can control is the why, and that will dictate everything about how you operate from there. So this is back to what I was saying about the two types of work from homer. Okay, so for example, I'm going to quickly do a quick poll out to everybody, so you should see it on your screen. There's two types of people who want to work from home. There's those who actively want and would prefer to work from home. Okay. And then there's those who would be working from home due to circumstances. So, the difference there is that the person who is working from home due to circumstances like mainly COVID, they, when things go back to normal, they can't wait. They want to get back to it as much as possible. And then on the other side, there's somebody who goes either they didn't like it at the start, but they're now realizing there's lots of benefits to working from home and they'd like to encourage that going forward. Or there's somebody who had sort of always thought they'd like to have more working from home, and COVID gave them the chance to do so, and we've dropped immediately overnight all the barriers we're probably getting, and they want to try and find a way to keep it going. So it's sort of like 67, 33% on the people here who've responded so far most want to try and actively continue working from home, and the others are those people who are working from home due to necessity. Okay. Both people, and these two different extremes, people who have varying degrees of it, will have a role to play in how things happen going forward. Okay. So basically, I'm just sharing results there, everybody. There you go. And essentially, if you are you should try and use this course as a roadmap to try and make sure that you can continue to work from home in the way you'd like to do it, especially if it's the expectation where you are is that people will go back the way things used to be as soon as physically possible. Or B, use this course if you can't wait to get back to the office. Use this course as a way to try and maintain your sanity as long as you possibly have to work from home and take what you can out of it. But basically, the intention of somebody is the biggest success factor as to whether somebody is, working from home or remote working. Okay. So the other big difference is, I'm going to launch another quick check as well, is are you employed or are you self-employed? So the two differences here are, if you're employed by somebody, you more than likely have access to a bigger range of resources, okay, than if somebody who might be self-employed. So if you're a small business and you're working for yourself, you have a bit more flexibility and freedom, but you don't have the funds to go and request things that you might need to make things easier. But if you're employed, and so far everybody in the call seems to be employed, it's fine. Then basically what happens there is that you have to jump through whatever hoops or procedures are put in place to try and ensure that you're able to continue to work from home. Now, the main approach has to be one of being open and able to collaborate across the board with the intention to make it work where it can, and then be honest and upfront where it can't. And I'll cover some of the pitfalls and things we'll get later on. But the main thing is to be aware of that if you're currently in a role within an organization that is being done from home because of necessity, and you think, I like this, I'd like to continue doing this work from home thing. But when you sit down at night and you have a heart to heart with yourself, you go, there's actually no real way that this could be done in the normal world from home. You got to own it and be honest about it. And then you're back to the retraining, discussing, being open, trying to see other opportunity approach there. And likewise, if you're somebody who is doing a job that can be done from home and you really can't wait to get back in the office, if the conversation comes up in work, about sort of some people want to work from home more, some people don't, you don't poo-poo it because you don't want to go back to the home office. You'd rather be in your place of work. You again have to be honest and say, well, the job I'm doing at the moment, yeah, it can be done from home, but I personally prefer to be in the office. But you don't negate it for somebody else who's there, because it's going to be a case to just be aware of what the limits are. And some roles will be easier than others. Everyone with me so far? Yeah. Okay. So some of the pitfalls of working from home, so we can sort of quickly go through some of these. There's a broad range of unhealthy habits, some more than others. So I don't know if everybody's seen, anyone's seen people do this or had colleagues doing it, like sitting in their pajamas all day or non-appropriate work clothes. Second thing is working from bed. I've had the experience of people saying that sometimes, especially if you're there and you want to have a quick call with them on the phone and you're trying to talk about something, and you're trying to email them things, and you're saying, oh, look, I have it on here, and if you go to look at this part of the screen, and look, can I just quickly zoom you? I can share a screen. I can show you what I mean. Whereas if you're talking to somebody face to face in an office, you whip out a piece of paper, you draw out your diagram, and you'd be able to both visualize and share the same information. I've had people say to me, actually sort of still in bed at the moment, maybe just email it to me, we can catch up again later on or something. So that's not a very good habit and does impact things, but people have done it. And bad ergonomics. This is one I'll get to afterwards. It's one of the things that, with the best will in the world, can cause problems, and it has longer term effects on people. Feelings of isolation. This has been reinforced with COVID. If you haven't stepped outside the house from Monday to Friday, or you're like going cat crazy, because you're sleeping at home, you're working at home, you're probably working some longer hours, it can feel pretty lonely unless you've got things in place to do it. Okay. And it also means you develop a little different mindset than other your colleagues would before. So the corporate culture mindset you'd have when you're all in one place starts to break up a little bit from there, which is not a bad thing, by the way. It just has to be aware that you don't lose the good parts of it and then sacrifice lose the good parts and you sacrifice that for something worse. Next one is not taking work time seriously. So, and that is a perception that can be out there, that people are not dialing it in, like doing half days, or they're mowing the lawn on a conference call and they switch off the lawnmower and on mute and say their piece and back on again and do it, or they're doing something else entirely when you're actually trying to sort of hold a meeting or a discussion. That's one of the impressions that can be out there with people working from home. That's a pitfall. Most people seem to be working longer at home, so this one is a perception. And if there is people who do it, they're very much in the minority from what research has been saying. But then again, you have to think critically about this. And if you're filling in a research survey, are you going to really admit that you DOS half the day as well? Are you going to be saying, oh, yeah, I'm working really, really hard? So you take it with a pinch of salt, but it is a perception out there sometimes that somebody is not putting their full weight is working from home. The one that is most happens a lot is that it's very hard to switch off. Like you're working in your place, you're working in your place of sleep, basically. And the visual cues and the checkpoints throughout the day that you would have had when it was time to sort of go home, your commute to unwind or whatever, they're no longer there. So people do find themselves working longer hours than before when they're working from home. And the other piece is not being taken seriously. Now, there's a cohort of people who don't value a work from home job as much as an in-office job. Now, while COVID forced a lot of companies' hands, all right, there is still a culture in certain types of industries and at a company level, and it's maybe at personality level of the CEOs, etc., that working from home is not the proper way to do things. That they should be in their cubicle doing stuff. I'm paying them. I want to see them there doing what they're doing and should be doing what I'm paying them. That reflects, the flip side there is that besides being a very Dickensian view of employees and teams, it does reflect on the fact that if roles are reversed and the person saying that could work from home, they're basically admitting that, yeah, they'd be happy enough to actually sky off and not pull the full weight as well if they work from home all day. So just because that may be the impression they have doesn't mean it's a correct one, but it does exist out there, and it does vary from culture to culture and company to company. A lot of the IT companies like Twitter, Facebook, Google, Symantec, those guys, they're sort of bringing out like work from home type policies across the board. But that's for the vast majority of people. End of the day, if you're a data center supervisor for Facebook out in Clonee, you can't sit back and call in working from home all the time, because if there's a server down and you have to swap out the fan blades, you have to be there to physically stick on your gloves and whip it out, fix it, and put it back up so it's up and running as quickly as possible. So even there's certain jobs that you manifestly can't do from home. So, end of the day, even though the companies that are embracing it, they're embracing it where they can. And the discussion that has to happen as people who would be either leading teams or members of teams is to be aware as to some people might be really wanting to get back to the norm and work in the office, and they're pushing their opinions on people who might prefer to work from home. And in the middle of all these two different viewpoints, reality and facts get knocked on the head. So, with me so far? Yeah, okay. So here are some of the traps to consider as well. So these are some considerations from the you all the way out to your work group. And if you're somebody who leads a work group or who leads a team, take double notes of some of these. So the first one is a pitfall is motivation. The perception could be that, if, especially with COVID, again, the biggest issue is that if it's yet yesterday, tomorrow day, and you lose track over what day of the week, or the start of the week, or the weekend, it can be very hard to keep things going because it's almost like Groundhog Day over and over again. That's not normal when you're working from home in the post-COVID world, and so it will be very much similar in some ways to the pre-COVID world, in that you'll be able to go out, take a break during the day, go get your shopping done, or have a coffee or whatever as part of your sort of normal work from home life will be. But there's an issue with motivation, and people want people to sort of work harder. The problem as well is that a lot of companies had the technology or the ability to physically ask people to work from home, but they didn't have the emotional or managerial strengths to back it up. So if you have a boss who can't, or a supervisor who can't physically see you doing stuff all the time, and they're a bit anxious about, are you doing your things, are you being productive, they're going to try and use the tools they do have to try and make sure that you're doing what you should be doing. So that means a lot of cases there's more metrics, more meetings, and a lot of people will be a bit more highly strung because they feel the need to be working when they're at home. And especially if you have some instant communication systems, like back in when I used to work in corporate, sometimes the instant messaging system, which would be a bit like enclosed version of Skype. So it would be like either Teams, or it would be Lotus Notes, same time, whatever, those sort of things. They can be weaponized quite easily, and you routinely have managers looking down over the list of their team and seeing the red, amber, green status symbol. And if somebody was amber or red, oh, woe betide, they'd be getting a phone call so very quickly after saying, why are you, what's up? And then I have to say, well, I put myself on Do Not Disturb because I didn't want to be disturbed. I'm trying to get the presentation for the VP for tomorrow, like you asked me to do. Go away. But those things happen. It's just natural, but we don't have the emotional clarity at manager level yet to be able to handle these sort of remote teams. Conversely, when you're remote, when I was looking after teams that were globally located, you change the approach from FaceTime management, which is like FaceTime, besides being Apple's instant messaging system, is the American term for showing your face that you're actually doing stuff in an office. So Apple just took the name FaceTime for their application because they thought it was cool. But removing the need for FaceTime management was then replaced with the need for performance management, in that if you have a task or something to be done by a certain date or a time, you expect it to be done, and you just focus on task to task. You don't worry about the minutiae of, are they logged in at 1 minute past 9, or they clocked off at 16:55 according to the system logs, etc. You ignore all that stuff and you just go, basically, we needed XYZ by the end of the day. Is XYZ there? Yes, it is. Happy days. That's essentially the type of change you get when you're a manager in a remote team. But then again, the same people I would have worked with who would have had remote teams as well, and local teams, they'd have had two different styles for both sort of teams. So people can adapt and do it. It's just going to take again, honest discussion in groups and work groups in your organization to be able to make sure you create it the right way to help everybody. The other pitfall is, a trap, sorry, is no I in Zoom. So socialization. So there's a lot more to be said for working in a building with work colleagues. They are colleagues, the people you become friends, the people you don't just sit down and talk shop all the day. You get to know them. You have a bit of crack sometimes, you have a chat. You don't get that going easily and naturally with remote working the way things are at the moment. If you're not leaving the house since Monday and you're feeling it and you're a team leader or supervisor, guess what? Your team's probably feeling it. And, then it comes down to the question of whose responsibility is it to make sure that the team mental health and well-being is okay? Well, the answer is everybody's, but it's easier if you're the team lead or the supervisor to make sure that your team are actually handling things okay. And you genuinely, not just because you have to tick a box, you genuinely care that of their health and well-being. And that can be hard. Some people don't see the best will in the world. I say this, a lot of managers and supervisors confuse managing metrics with managing people. And they don't realize that behind every single figure or burden rate count or staff budget, etc., there's a person with their own thoughts, dreams, hopes, etc. That gets blurred. And if you're used to an organization that sort of manages people as resources, it can be very hard to flip the switch in your head to try and make sure to check that everybody's okay, because you've got to be really checking that they're okay so they can work harder for you. If you start with that approach, it'll come across as fake and people will see right through it because, frankly, people are not silly. So that's an issue that happens a lot. And at the moment, to be fair, there's no real technology based solutions out there to fit this box in. Like the driver to help make remote working work better, if you've looked at the changes that's happened or been announced rapidly by tech companies over the last, say, 6-7 months, it's all been around doing the work better. It's not been about making sure people are happier behind the screens. It'll probably get there some stage, and hopefully there's some 16-year-old in their parents' bedroom right now writing the code that will form the thing that will make things happier down the line. But for right now, a lot of the work has been employer driven, and that it's easier to share files, easier to check this, easier to do that, all around easier to be productive, not easier to be a good team or communicating with everybody. So if there's any budding coders or any kids or family members who are like IT, that's a definite market gap that's open. Next one is no proper workspace. So this is heavily dependent on everybody's personal situation. So not everybody has a spare bedroom they can convert to an office. Bad workspace or not a proper workspace can cause a lot of problems. These could be everything from eye strain down to voice problems. And I know I'm one for talking now because my voice is hoarse today, so that's not very good. But basically, when you need to talk more and project more over technology, it's very harder. It's much harder. And it's also harder to communicate without the visual cues you would have if you were sitting down face to face. So although it might be seen as it's grand, I just need a space to stick my laptop and have my phone, I'll be fine. Long term, it's not fine. And if it's something that you want to try and do in the longer period is to work from home, that's something you need to address. Next is toddlers and toddler tasks, is what I call this one. Managing your time working from home is a problem, a lot of cases. You may have a lot of toddler tasks that don't mean these aren't important. They can be quite important things to do. And you have these big blocks of work you have to try and do. And then as well, because you're at home, because you're in the house a lot, you're going to notice things. So it'll be, your brain doesn't easily compartmentalize things as much as you might like to. So you can have a notepad for work stuff, a notepad for house stuff and domestic stuff. Your brain will see them both together. This can be compounded, by the way, if your other half, works normal or has a job that they have to be out for, and they see you as working at home as being at home. That doesn't help things either when it goes on there, because you're at work. You just happen to be working in your place of living. So sometimes it can be tricky when you have like odd jobs around the house that are merging together, or things you have to do that's annoying you, and you're there doing something else that's not so urgent for work, but this is your work time. It can cause lots of problems and can cause sort of cognitive dissonance there from that as well. So As well as that, I'm not mentioning the fact the actual word toddlers. If you are somebody who's got kids as well and they're at home with you and you have to work as well as be a childminder, you're doing two separate full-time jobs at the one time, and that just compounds the stress. So it doesn't make it easy. So now on to some of the tips or things we can sort of do to try and help avoid and overcome some of these. Okay, so there may be some of the ones I've covered that are aware, or that you're aware of, that directly have impacted you, or maybe ones that will not have been impacting you. Everyone's different. Everyone's got different situations and work situations. But as we go through some of these good practices, which is the majority of what we're going to talk about, if there's something that you think could be directly helpful, grab it with both hands and go for it. If not, ignore it, file it later on. It won't be affecting you. So we're going to try and go through some things you can do if all these affect you or they're an issue. So the first thing, the top tip before you do anything else related to working from home, is you write out your ideal day. So, for example, for me, it'd be like getting up about sort of 7:30, 8 o'clock, having a nice coffee, walking the beach, getting a nice big breakfast. Sorry, write out, not that ideal day, write out your ideal work day, because there's a difference. We've got to work to provide food, clothing, and shelter, so we may as well enjoy it while we're doing it. So the other thing as well is your ideal work day may change as life goes on. So you write it out and then you save it and you revisit it yearly. I have a habit of doing a quick yearly review every year. I've done it past 25 years or so. It's boring, but it's something you can sort of, all it takes is an hour or two at the end of the time. Usually that little downtime, Christmas is gone, you're eating all your turkey and you've opened all your presents and you're like, 3 more days till New Year's, whatever. That's a nice time to do it because it's a bit of time reflection as well. But consistently checking out what ideally you want for the previous year and have you achieved it is actually quite a good thing to do. It's a form of journaling. For those who might do it already, it works well. So same thing with this. You write out your ideal workday. And the main thing is this your ideal workday as of right now. So for example, when I was in my late 20s, I was working in a job that was in sales and had a direct link between how much you sold and how much money you took home. And I was trying to chase, so that was back in the days when obviously people could afford to buy a house. So I was trying to chase deposit for my first house. And for then, that time in my life, my ideal work day would have started in the office about 7:30, would have ended in the office maybe 7 or 8 at night, 4.5, 5 days a week. I'd try to get off early on a Friday. But I was chasing a goal, and it was in that time that was worth it for me to chase the goal to get that sort of get on the property ladder. Again, this is a long time ago when property was sort of affordable, not these days. So that was my ideal work day then. My ideal work day now is a little bit more different in that I sort of prioritize doing things to try and accommodate family life and things I want to pursue and enjoy, etc. So my ideal work day now has completely flipped around, and I'd have been horrified at that 25 years ago or so. Okay, so be aware this is just a statement as of right now is what things are. And so what you'd like to try and do is write out your ideal workday from the time you get up all the way through. And it doesn't have to be specific as to what job you do. It's sort of the type of job, whether you do things checking in, whether you're sort of going out and around on the road, whether you're doing things at home, whether you are in front of a computer, whether you're having meetings with people more often, whatever. Then you basically list the things that you want to do but aren't and flag them. So, sorry, skip a step there. Once you write out your ideal workday, then you write out quickly what your average day looks like right now. And then you quickly do a delta. So when you're doing something already that's part of your ideal day, great stuff. When there's a gap between what you're doing and what ideally you want to be doing, just note it down, write it down, put a circle around it, put an X, whatever. This is part of the first step in the 30-day challenge. So if you want to just stick it in the back of your mind and do the challenge at some stage, that's fine. But it does take a bit of time to do it. And then once you flag them, the things that are different, you break them into 3 categories, 3 buckets: easy fit, tricky fit, or difficult. So this is a expansion of the circles of influence approach. Okay, has everybody heard of that before I go any further? No. Okay, so you can change things within a number of circles of influence. So first one in the middle is you. So there's things you can change yourself in that you can pick up, you can do it straight away. I wanted some water, pick it up. Circle of influence is straight up to me. I want it, I go, I get it. The next one is a circle outside that you can't do yourself directly. But it may be something that you can do with people who you can pretty much, I won't say guarantee, because you can never take people for granted, but you could pretty much, with a certain fair degree of certainty, make sure you can get. So if I want a cup of tea while I'm on this call, I could, with a reasonable level of certainty, I might get my bottom kicked, but I could sort of call upstairs for my wife to go down and say, "Baby, a cup of tea, please." And chances are she would go and make a cup of tea for me. So the next circle outside is you have to have other support from somebody directly, but you can pretty much sure you might be okay to get their support from them. And difficult requires other cooperation. That could be management at work. It could be a case that if you're in your ideal work day, you realize you need a space to sit down, focus on your work, and you want to build an office pod, then the difficult part requires spending money, getting someone to build something, etc., etc. So it requires outside, and then it's a bigger piece of work to do. It's not impossible. It requires a bigger piece of work. Likewise, if you realize that some of the things you want to change is a completely different job role, and you need to change job, that's difficult. So there are the three sort of circles we use for this. And basically, again, easy fit can be done by you or all of your family decisions. Tricky fit can be done soon, or planned with others. And difficult fit is not feasible either now or in the future without major planning. We don't say impossible, because that will sort of get the wrong mindset up. And usually when people do sort of lists of things to change, it usually gets people naturally will put it into the difficult fit area, especially if they've had colleagues who've tried it before and it hasn't worked for them. Okay, so it is also the glass half full person puts everything to easy, no problem, I can do it, and they actually then overcompensate and it causes problems. So this is to be taking a step back, seeing exactly what you want to try and change from your workday, and working out where these things are. So I've just thrown in some examples here. Okay, so if, for example, you decide that I really am not getting out as much as I want to do, I want to do an extra 30 minutes exercise every day, that's an easy fit. You might think it is. You either just get up half an hour earlier or 45 minutes earlier and you do it. Or if it's something you want to go and do with your partner, or you need to sort of arrange your childminding, you speak to somebody and say, well, look, each evening after work, I've finished, I need to go for a run or whatever, and you do it. It's doable. You don't have to go and join a gym or anything else. At the very base level, you can go and implement it. Eat a healthy lunch, same thing. You can just decide to eat healthy lunch. You have to plan it, and you may have to try and meal prep or do things in advance, but it's doable. It's all in your control if you have the intention, because that's the single biggest factor for success. That's important to you, you want to do it. Likewise, if you want to have an hour of kids time, again, you can plan around it and work with it. Then tricky fit would be an example of, say, if you wanted to build an outside office or something, or teach yoga classes in your spare time, or keep Wednesday afternoons free, you could do it, but you need to have some planning and discussion. If you have colleagues at work that you can sort of deal with, you may have to speak to them about sort of changing shifts, etc., to accommodate. It's doable. It's not something you can quickly see an immediate plan to solve, but you can see the first few steps to get things resolved. And then tricky fit, again, it's longer term planning, and you have an idea of where you want to be. You're talking months, maybe years down the line, but if it's important enough to you, you start making the changes now and make discussions now. So if it's example that you work in an organization that you think, yep, I'd really like to have a split week at home or office, or I want to work from home fully, but currently the job won't allow that when things go back to normal, you start having a discussion now, because it may mean that you need to sort of look at and plan, not give a fait accompli, because the worst thing you hate as a manager is a fait accompli from somebody saying, you don't do this for me right now, I'm quitting, I'm going off. That doesn't work. What does work is when you say, I'd like to do this, can we talk and put together a plan over the course of a year or two to help me achieve that, or what's the most achievable time to do it? Because usually, especially if you're in a larger organization, there's lots of learning opportunities, cross-training opportunities, etc., that can come up and you can work with. Again, you have to have the person who's in charge of the budget on side, and they have to agree that you make a plan as well. It has to be quid pro quo for both. So basically, they're the three buckets you throw them into. With me so far? Yeah. So don't make sure you stick everything into one of them. You have to sit back and look logically. And end of the day, if you do have a lot of difficult fit things that's going to require change, remember your ideal workday is right now, and you may be halfway through a plan and things will change and life can throw curveballs at people. Keep whoever you've engaged for support to achieve this goal abreast of any change that can happen so they can help work with you as well. Again, remember the biggest influence is the intention. If you want it to work, you stand a much better chance of it working. Also, just because a colleague may have tried something in the past and it didn't work for them doesn't mean it will not work for you. There is again, some organizations have it, some don't. There is a very lazy management style structure whereby people will say, I couldn't give it to Fred Flintstone because therefore I can't give you the same thing, or Fred will be upset. That's a very easy way to get out of something as a manager, but what it does mean is that you're then rewarding inefficiency. So if Fred Flintstone is one of the rare type of people who you couldn't trust to open a door or close a toilet lid, and you're not going to trust him working from home because you know he'll be sitting back watching football the whole time. But, Marge Simpson there, that she will do everything. She'll be there, ready, responsive, and very trustworthy. You don't penalize Marge for the efficiencies of Fred. You have to be honest with both and put together a plan, accordingly. So just because a colleague won't be able to implement it doesn't mean you shouldn't ask or try. The other thing as well is that, it's all a case of managing expectations. So just because the maybe some previous expectations there doesn't mean they can transfer directly across yourself. So you have to be aware of that when you're having the discussion with your upline. And likewise, if you're an upline, you need to be checking your own cultural bias and see exactly, the person in front of you, will they react the same as somebody else? And then it's down to you, basically, as the leader, to work out a reason to sort of way to actually facilitate those people who are trying their best and who will play ball. But managing expectations is a problem, and stress is one of the things that arises when you've expectations that don't match the fact. So anybody who's been in middle management knows you have pressures from up there, you have pressures from there, on each side, and you're stuck in the middle, and you have to try and juggle to make sure everybody's sort of kept happy, or at the very least kept as happy as possible in the situation you have. So the mindset to take is you need to try and start working from home and stop living at work. And that starts with you, so the you in the middle. Once you start with this approach, and this dictates how you're going to start reacting with the rest of the day, it will help you. So you need to set your own house rules, either on your own or as a team, as to how you're going to do that. So once you take the mindset that you're just going to be doing the work you need to do at home, but you're doing the luxury of working from your place of residence for the benefit of your employer, you need to set your own house rules of how you're going to do it. So, for example, the picture on the screen, I've had people in the past say, oh, that's a really bad picture. Why is she having to look after the kid as well as, try and do her work? She looks, she's in the ground. Others say, oh, that's lovely. She can spend time with her baby and she's able to do her work as well. The only person who could answer and say whether this picture works for the person is the lady in the picture herself. And I'm assuming she's a model or somebody who was asked to pose for this picture, and that's fine because it's a stock photo. I don't know the background, but in theory, the only person who can tell if a situation is working for them is the person themselves. Just because they may have it all together and they appear on time, they're happy and smiley in front of the screen when you're doing meetings and Zoom meetings, and they think, yeah, they seem happy as Larry. The only person who knows truly is the person themselves. And you have to sort of reach out to them and ask and check, are they happy the way things are on a one-to-one, especially if you're the manager of that person. Okay. So basically, the only person who can define success is you, as to whether it's working for you. And remember, some people will find change hard. So as we go through some of the next bits, if you have to negotiate or discuss things with your place of employment, remember to pick your battles. Okay. You might need to jump through lots of hoops to get things if you need it, if it's something physical you need, especially if it involves parting cash. Okay. But be aware that you need to sort of work out what your priorities are and what's important to you, and then just don't go looking for everything. Just try and see which ones might be the most useful or reasonable for you at this moment in time. Especially if you do have somebody who's a little bit tech phobic or who's old school management style. And when I say old school, it's anybody who was trained before the year 2020, sort of up to 2015 or so, because a lot of that's still behind the times with technology. So you have to just try and pick your battles. So again, some facts to help you with this. Over 3/4 of the people working from home currently say they aren't happy with their home office setup. And this was done by Chadwick's, who's a builder's merchant. So again, stick on your critical thinking hat and ask yourself, is people who want to flog people building materials really going to be looking for the right information, how they've asked the questions, etc., to do it? But let's just go with what we have. It's the only research that seems to be done on it. And that 25% of people work from a spare room, 17% work in the kitchen, 11% in the bedroom, 2% in the garden, and then most say don't have the right office equipment, like use household items, kitchen table, etc., etc. So that's pretty much what you would expect to happen, especially as a lot of people en masse were thrown into working from home with very little prep time back in last March. But just because there may be a case that a lot of people are not happy with their office setup, it's a good chance to look and see, well, if I'm not happy with it, it doesn't mean I have to stick with it. I can try and change things or make some differences. So the first thing is to make sure you have a place in your house that you call work. Okay. So this is a UN rep who was basically, her ideal workspace is a ironing board because it allows her to move around the house with the son for calls and stuff. So she'd be on TV quite a bit or doing interviews. So it helps her by having that, and she can avoid the family. That's okay. You have to have a place in house that you call work. So even though having a dedicated place of work is ideal, that's down to the individual. So if you would like to be somebody who's a house commuter and you would want to work on a Monday in the spare bedroom, on Tuesday in the living room, Wednesday in the kitchen, just have a bit of a change of scene, that motivates you. If that's working for you, that's great. Somebody else might find it horrible and they want to have the same spot and dedicated place to do it. But you need to make sure that you have a place in the house that you are happy enough that is your work spot. So there's a few things that we actually would say to try and make things easier. So for example, if you are somebody at the most extreme end who's a house commuter and you just need a laptop and that's you're at work, you can get into the mindset for it, and you use the same machine for personal reasons. A quick tip is to just have a desktop for work and then clone your desktop and have a desktop for personal stuff as well. And Windows and Apple machines allow you to do that, have multiple desktops. Quick way to do it, you can Google how to do it. I won't waste the time for this call explaining through it. It's very fast to do and very easy, and it just means that your computer is set up for your work, and then you flick a button, you alt tab it over, and then it's set up for playtime or games or whatever else you might be using. That's if you use the same machine. But end of the day, you have to have a visual cue that you're in work mode when you sit down or you switch on or you do something from there. Oops. The other one is to make sure that you do have a place you call work. This is what usually would be an easy fit. Okay, so it can be agreed by you yourself, or if you have a family and you need their input, they may have to agree with you. So it can be tidy temporary or a permanent fixture. Okay, so tidy temporary, for example, is if due to your house circumstances and situation, there's no spare room, there's no corner in a place that you can actually crack open a desk and set things up the way you want to be. You have to use a kitchen table or something else, whatever from it. That's like a tidy temporary, okay? And if you have to do that type of approach, you have a way to actually turn the place into your workspace for that time. So that can be something as simple as clearing away all the breakfast stuff at a certain time every morning, having a mouse pad or cloth you put down your machine on, they can use so that you then clear everything away at the end, and it's back to home space afterwards. One quick way to do that is if you have a box or a drawer or something where you can actually take all your work stuff off at the end of the day, physically pack it away into the thing and put it to one side or into a spare room, to a place in your living room or something. So it's out of sight, out of mind, and then the space comes back to family space afterwards. And then when it's your work time again, You take it out, put away the family stuff, and reopen it again for work. That's a tidy temporary. And it doesn't mean that you have like your desktop, so your laptop on your table all the time plugged in and you just close it and switch it off and it's always left in the corner. It's physically put away. But it must work for you and has to be one that will work for you. It has to be appropriate for all your work. So, for example, if you need to get up from where you are sitting to take a Zoom call or a video call, that's not working for you. You need to be able to sit down and do every single task you can do. You should be able to do it right away from where you're sitting. Allow for quiet if possible. Not always possible if you're in a small apartment and you've got kids and they're home, especially now with the holidays for Easter. If they're home at the time and there'll be other people coming and going, it can be tricky, but as quiet as possible. Or you agree, again, this is the easy fit, but it has to be agreed with you and your family that when you know you have to be on calls, you're likely to have calls, you agree PlayStation time or screen time or something to try and help adapt that if they're not working, if they're not doing schoolwork. It's a way to try and get the sort of balance you need to do it. And basically, it has to be healthy for you, which we'll cover in a second. And if you haven't had a look at your workspace since last March, use this little opportunity to start having a look at it. And if there's something that you've looked at and you realize, actually, yeah, I didn't expect this to be this long. I know we're sort of going on a 6-week cycle, going back again fully for various things. But yeah, I think I may want to try and sort of get set up so it's a bit better for me. Use this talk as a catalyst to have a conversation with your boss or your manager and say, look, I need to have a chair or whatever it might be to make it work. And blame Muggins here as a point, because, we don't know how things are going to work out. And if it's something that's causing you problems, the longer you leave it, the only person who is suffering really is you, not your employer. So the reason why I say about being healthy is that there's no occupational health department at home. So your workspace, from a health point of view, has to avoid eye strain, has to protect your voice and your hearing, and has to help prevent back and neck problems. When you go into a place of work, and if you're in a formal office or a building, somebody at some stage has come in and looked at that and assessed it as to make sure it's safe and suitable for working. Nobody does that at home. It's just like grab whatever space we can, sit down and just try and log on and do what we need to do. So if it's a case that you are working from home and you want to continue to try and work from home in some shape or form, you need to have something to sort of ticks all these boxes as time goes on. And again, if you are somebody who's happy enough to go and buy the things yourself, easy enough. If you're somebody who's going to have to go through a procurement system or have to convince somebody, then it may be a longer, and as I said, choose your battles. Don't need to go overboard, by the way. I had somebody on our clinical team send me a request a while ago for a laptop riser because, I'm getting a bit of back pain because there's not working as much well for me. So that's grand, we'll get a new laptop riser for you. So she sent me over this list of things that she'd be happy with these sort of desks, that will increase, raise and lower, like costing like almost €1,000 per desk. And I went, maybe you can find something else that might work. You don't need to go overboard. There's lots of other solutions to do it. So you need to just focus on what will help you with these things. So, excuse me, here's a quick example because I try and like to practice what I preach. So on the left, there's my wife's workspace. So that's in the house. It's a separate office room upstairs, away from noise. She does online pediatric therapy, so you can't engage a kid virtually over Zoom without using all the bells and whistles. So green screen in the background, animated characters, cartoons coming in. She interacts with them, has a great time, and she, the clients sort of start learning the words, and it helps bring along the speech. So it has to be very interactive with pediatric speech therapy. So it needs dedicated space. So for her, fit for her work purposes, she's all the bells and whistles, powerful laptops, etc., broadband connections, iPads, to do the basics of what you need to do. On the right is my one. I just physically need a corner of a room, just enough space to sit, hold the monitors and a laptop and a coffee cup. And that's what I'm talking to you from right now. So it doesn't have to be a dedicated space, it has to be something that will work for you. But you have to be able to jump on a Zoom call from right where you are. You have to be able to have all the stuff you need to do your job there. And if it's temporary, you have to be able to pack it away. But It doesn't have to be overworked as much as you need for the role you have. And that again is where you have to be sort of taking a step back and be honest with what you need for to do your role. If it's a case that you are involved in finance and you have lots of physical receipts or things that you need to look at and check, and you have like sort of confidential documents has to be kept on lock and key paper-wise, or your solicitor, you'd have by necessity a different type of workspace than somebody else. So commuting around the house is not a way to handle that very easily, because you're basically putting at risk some things you need to do your job. So it is very much task specific as to what your minimum may be, but at the very least, it has to be able to do everything you need to go and do your full job entirely from where you are. And for some people, as I said, it can be just a space. Others may need something a bit more convoluted depending on the role. So here's an example, because I'm going for the minimum one, of the equipment to get the best you can. And this is an order of priority. First, in my own opinion, a good gaming chair. Okay. Not an office chair, a gaming chair. Gaming chairs are built and designed for people to sit at extended periods of time in front of a machine. You have serious video gamers who will spend easily 12 hours at a row. Hopefully they'll take toilet breaks, you can never be sure, in front of the screen, okay? The chairs are designed for that. I can see quite a big headrest, secure armrests, etc. It helps ergonomic for the back. They're designed for long-term sitting. If you are somebody who would normally have an office role and you might classify as quite sedentary, I will guarantee you're doing more sitting at home than you would be in the physical office. You don't get up to go and sort of chat with colleagues. You don't have some physical piece of paper or something to go and have a word with. There's none of this. If you're sitting here and somebody's got a room 2 doors down, you're not going to pick up the phone or WhatsApp them to ask them a question. You don't usually get up, walk over and say hi. So you'll naturally get more movement, even if it's a small amount. You get a lot less working at home. So the very least is to have a good chair to help support you. The next thing is a screen or a laptop riser, okay? So that you're looking straight and having to go to that or having to go that. And for most people, you start hunching over if you try and look at laptops, and especially if you have it on a coffee table or something that's not correct. So a laptop riser or screen so that it's at the same height as you. External keyboards are useful. They will usually go with that, because if you have your laptop up here at your eye screen and your keyboard is there, you're then hunching your shoulders, causing shoulder neck problems doing that. So you need to have a external keyboard to make it work that way. What I usually will tell people and suggest is that because you pick your battles, a keyboard, you'll get in your local pound shop these days, for a few bob. It's not too hard to get, or you look on Amazon or something, or buy and sell, you get an easy one. So there's things you can actually fix yourself. And most time it's a bit petty to be going and asking for a requisition request for a single keyboard, something simple. If you can choose your battles, there's something you can make easy quite yourself. A chair is a bit different. Quality headset and quality microphone. The more you have to project your voice, the worse it's going to be. It'll cause tension in your muscles. It'll cause, again, back and neck problems again. As well as that, if you're hearing somebody through speakers on a laptop, it can be a bit hard as well, especially if there's a breaking connection and you're trying to hear on Zoom. It's quite difficult. So basically, to eliminate that, a good quality headset or quality microphone. What I'm using here is a one for broadcasting. Most of the time, I just use the free one that came with my phone. And if you are somebody who's got a smartphone, Android or Apple smartphones, I will bet you that you will have a very good top of the range headset that came with it free as part of it. And most will plug in. At the very least, you need to go and get a little adapter from Amazon or something or Tiger stores, those places, to connect into your machine. So most people will have a good quality headset already just by having a smartphone. And they're useful things to try and make sure you don't have to sort of stress or strain to go from there. And especially if you're going to be on Zoom calls a lot or doing conferences or talks quite a bit. So then the next piece is to set your house rules. So again, back to the you part, sitting at your desk and a workspace. That's something which, once you have that sorted out, or you're in the process of getting it sorted out, you need to make sure you can set your house rules, both internal and external house rules. So remember, starting with the you, then the next out, and the next circle out from there of how you can control things. So here's some internal rules that you could look at when you try and agree on a plan for these things in advance. So basically, when you are at work, you are at work. So if it's a case that you have another half who might, with the best will in the world, might sort of confuse sometimes you being at home with you being at home to do home stuff, it could be a trick. It could be a conversation to have out of the way pretty fast, because when you're at work, you're in work mode. The dishes stay in the sink. It's as if you're not in the building. Don't expect to go and do things, okay? Unless it suits you at the time to do it and it makes sense to you. But don't feel under pressure or have the expectation you have to do things as well, because you're at work mode. And again, about stress, that's where you have expectations and reality. The gap in the middle is the stress. So if you have in your head you have to do things around the house during your day, and that's reinforced by family members or something, excuse me, you have the conversation first and you set your house rules. And they need to be your rules and say that this is work time, full stop. If you have your other half that also works at home, and I've seen this happen sometimes as well, especially with tight space, there might be times where you have multiple calls or meetings happening simultaneously. And then it's a case of whose job or Zoom call gets priority, especially if you have to look after young kids at the same time. Have a discussion, agree it at that particular time. For example, in my house, I always take second place. Well, don't get a look in, and that's fine. That's the rules we put in place for it, because she has to deal with clients a lot more than I do. I can plan things around. So, but I have had conversations with people who are trying to talk about something quite important, and you hear the other party in the room saying, I'm on a call, can you, doing a training course, or watching a video, can you go to the room? And they get up from their place of work with their stuff and they move away, and you're still talking, and then inevitably it comes to stage, well, can you check that page on the website and we just make sure that it's exactly the way we want it? Oh, I will when I get back to the computer, because Fred's watching this or doing that in the meantime. You need to agree whose ones trumps whose or what the priorities are, and it can change. But this again is a conversation has to have with no egos. It's simply whose role needs it more than others at the time. And lastly, if you have kids at home and you have other family members, if they need to do things during the day and you have to say, they may not be the habit of being told no, you have the choice at every single time. It's whether you're going to try and stop what you're doing, interrupt your flow, go and do it and come back and then try and catch up later. Or you say, no, we'll catch up, we'll do it afterwards, and this is the rule for them. If you've got very young kids, it can be tricky, but a little bit older kids, you set a time and deviate, and then that's it. You can use visual things for younger kids. So a little red piece of paper or flag that you might have, that will be up there, and say, when this thing is on Daddy's desk, you can't interrupt Daddy. That's it. And then you take it away. But the but part is, because there are rules and you're agreed, when the time comes that you've promised to go and build that Lego or do whatever it's going to be, if you have a colleague who's wants more of your time and is past your work time, remember the right to disconnect. Sorry, I've got prior commitments. I'll catch up with you tomorrow, or at the very worst, I'll try and log in again this evening and see if I can fix the problem. You follow it, because the more a kid is told no, and has learned to expect that no essentially means it's never going to happen, the more they're going to kick up right there and then when you're trying to work on things. So if you say no later, the onus then is back on you to prioritize the later and make sure you deliver on it, or you're going to set up yourself up for failure afterwards. And again, take a bit of practice, but it is a house rule you have internally to go with. The next part is to have extended external house rules. So once you've got your own ones that you're happy with and you ideally would like to work with, and your people who live in the house with you are, excuse me, on board with it, you need to make sure you set your real work hours. Remember the right to disconnect. That's a worker's right to be able to disengage with work and refrain from engaging in work-related electronic communications during non-work hours and holidays. So a way to help that, and again, it's back that you ease stress when you manage expectations. What I used to do is to put my availability time at the bottom of emails. So especially if you lead a team, for example, I when I did manage teams directly, I put my work times at the bottom of emails and also stuck on some expectations of how I will respond if I get emails that I'm copied on or blind copied on, because you'll often get loads and loads of junk sending through that may be important to somebody else in the organization, but not directly relevant to you at the time. And you just get arbitrarily copied on them or BCC'd on them and just inflates your inbox. So it's basically, if you want me to respond directly as soon as possible, send it straight to me. If not, if I'm BCC'd or C'd, I'll review it at the end of each week. And that was the expectation. And I found very quickly, within the space of a week or two, my team started following, doing the same thing. And that was perfectly great. And within the team culture, we set up our own culture of how we respond and work with each other. Again, to make a plan and you stick to a plan. The flip side is, if I want to speak to Fred at 4:20, I bloody well expect Fred to be there to take my call at 4:20 because his work from home availability ends at 5:30. So it cuts both ways. And this is back to intention and trust. If this is the time you've set, you're there and you're available. I don't expect to hear the sound of a playground from Fred's phone at 4:20 because Fred's meant to be working. How many times afterwards? So it does work both ways, but it works the best when you get more organized and the team you work with externally start following this approach as well. Okay, so far? Yeah. But it does work both ways, and it does boil down to trust and intention. So these are just ways to try and help bring these through. And the other part with house rules is some rules for yourself to make sure they work well. So if you're person B who's only working from home because of no other choice and you can't wait to get back to it, you don't need to pay attention much to this part so much. Okay. If you're somebody who wants to try and expand to work from home more often as time goes on, if you take nothing else away from this, remember this one. Okay. You need to spend your time mastering the work from home tools, whatever they may be for your organization. Could be Zoom, could be Microsoft Teams, could be email, could be file sharing, it could be a database, it could be a CMS system. Whatever it is, you have to make personally responsibilities on you to make sure you can do them in your sleep. Nobody else. So this, again, counterintuitively, I'm talking about, right to disconnect and getting more personal time and work-life balance. Well, conversely, in order to achieve that, you need to put in some of your own time. You don't expect people you work, the employer you work for, to help you train something on a tool they should know. In your own time, just work out how to solve little problems and how to work the machines and the apps, etc. properly. Okay. There's no way to actually build faith that you can do the job from home if every time you have a Zoom call, you're trying to find the button to unmute your microphone, or you're trying to share a screen, you keep messing it up, or you can't seem to access something and send details over. If it's easier for you to be in the office and they can say, John, will you please pass me that file, and you can physically bring it over or print out, that's the easy way to do it. If you can't recreate that by simply and seamlessly sending a file electronically to the person without fluffing it up every time, they're not have much faith in you being able to work from home going forward. So this is back to taking the honest look at it as how you need to do it. And if you find there's big gaps between your ability to master these tools and you want to work from home, and this is where you want to go for down the line, as you start having a conversation with your management now, but you start learning these tools and make that as part of your conversation, because otherwise they can't trust you to do the job if you can't get the basics right that way. And people forget that a lot. The second thing is a tip I would suggest. Some people disagree with this one in the past, and that's fine. But this reduces errors or mistakes. If you have a task management app that work provides, you make sure you put your personal tasks into it as well, but you mark them as private so nobody else can see them. So if work is giving you Office 365, learn Office. If they use Google or Slack, use that from it, because when you start having two calendars and you might have, let's say, when the world changes back again, piano lessons for Rita at 5:30 p.m. and you don't have that in your work calendar, especially if you're working from home, you won't have to try and leave at a certain time. You're more likely to miss that, and it's going to go over or cause problems. So likewise, if you have it in your work calendar, but it's blanked out to everybody else as a private appointment, but you can see it, you can work around it. And it also means that somebody else knows not to put something in that time as well for you. The other piece which is useful, depends on your job role, is to discover your high productivity periods. So back to when I was saying at the very start about how the type of work changes from face time to productive time. If you are somebody who has a job that is like customer service and you have to be always on and answer phone calls, etc., you can't really do this. Your high productivity period has to be when you're on the call. If you've got a job that you have different types of tasks, try and learn when your circadian rhythm is working. So for the most people, that means mid-morning they can do more detail-oriented tasks. They'll have a slump after lunchtime, and it'll be a bit harder to focus on those things. So you can actually do less detail-oriented, more movement-based things, filing, organizing, etc. Maybe just answering some emails and correspondence. But if you have to go and start looking at numbers or analyzing things again, usually after 3:30, 4 o'clock, people get another spurge for a couple of hours afterwards. And again, from about, say, 8 to 10 at night to get a spurge as well. That's the way most people's rhythms work. People can be different. If you have a job that allows it, you may as well work to the types of tasks that suits you at the time. Because as long as you get it done when you say you're going to do it, that's all that most people will be interested in at the end. Another one which is counterintuitive is try different focus or environmental techniques that work for you. So it's your home. Clients, colleagues, you can't smell over Zoom yet. So if it helps you to have burn scented candles or incense or something, knock yourself out, whatever will help you to do it. Create a place you like being in. If it's a case that you might focus on having noise, like History Channel on low might work. My 8-year-old, when he was doing his homeschooling, he liked having heavy metal on the background, and his writing improved perfectly. Everyone's different. You just go with what you have to go with. But just remember that, if you have to go on a call and you are somebody who has music in the background, just make sure you're able to mute it from right where you are before you go on the call. And the most important thing as well is don't apologize for any steps you need to do to put in place to make sure it works, okay? Because it's going to help you. That's the important part. Now for some good practice, I'm going to quickly run through this because I know we're coming to the top of the hour. And I am going to continue on for a little bit of the time so that those watching the replay will get the whole talk. And if somebody has to drop off because of something else, that's absolutely fine. I don't mind that. I won't take it personally. So I'm going to quickly cover a regular day from the night before until the following night with an ideal work from home type approach. Okay. This is something you have as an FYI. It's something you can use as an AMAT. You can change it as things that will work for you, but this will help plan things out, because if you don't get the habits down and repeating on a regular basis, you're going to start trying to make a change. It won't stick and you won't see any benefit in your daily life. So the first thing is each night you make a to-do list the night before, and you write a next day's list as the last worst task of the day before. So right before you switch off your laptop each evening, you write out the next day's work tasks. If there's any must-do house things, okay, add them in as well, because this will become apparent in a minute. But sometimes if you living at home, working at home, and you have things that are important and they're all jumbling up, add them too at the same time. For example, I have to order some gravel for the back garden today to help fix something that I messed up yesterday. No, that's not a work task, but I have that in my calendar to do before the shops close because it's important and it's going to affect quality of life afterwards. Stuff like that can make a difference. It could be a case of hoovering, doing something around the house, getting a builder in, whatever it might be. If it's house stuff that you have to do as well and you need to get them done by a certain time, add them in so you have completely the things you want to achieve by the end of the day. Go to bed at a definite time. This is a hard one for a lot of people, but try it. This is something to aim at. You need to get at least a minimum of 6, ideally 7, 8 hours sleep. We've lost the fact that a good night's sleep is a very, very handy way to get more energy for the next day. And if you're already starting off the day on 70, 80% of your potential, here's already where you can go is down. If you don't have a commute, if you don't have to be running around trying to get out the door at a certain time, you do have the ability to try and at least plan to get some decent night's sleep. And that might mean you have to go to bed at what you would call a silly early hour in order to achieve that. If that's the case, so be it. If it's good, it will make a difference if you manage to get it, because then you'll realize after a while that you've been running a sleep deficit for quite a while and you just got used to it. The paradox here is the more real freedom you'll end up with, the more organized you must force yourself to be. And it's, again, counterintuitive, but the more you organize and structure your day, the more freedom you'll be able to be to do things that you want to do afterwards. And another good practice is when you get up in the morning, before you start your work, a good practice is exercise first thing, make that non-negotiable time. If you've used to being going in to an office or to a place of work, the little hack or trick you can use here is just get up at your usual commute time and use that time you would have spent commuting to do like a 20-minute exercise program or something. There's bucket loads of free ones on YouTube that you can quickly look at. A lot of them came out through the pandemic. They're still there. You don't have to leave your house, especially in Ireland. If you say I'm going to go for a run every morning, no, just wait till the winter hits or summer hits. You just change from warm rain to cold rain. You're not going to be really enthused to go for a run every morning. Do something you do inside your house, repeat it, if that's something that you'd like to try and start with. But the hack there is stick to your usual commute time. A habit has been to get up a bit later and go to bed a bit later at night because you don't have this sort of external factor driving you to do it. So again, this is something you can just choose to do yourself if you wish. Get dressed for work. It can be posh top and baggy bottoms, that's fine, but work clothes. So essentially, you change every day as if you were going to go into work. And then you plan and create a morning routine for yourself. And because if you have a house, if you're living with other people and you have a family sharing the house with you, you need to make sure that they all are on board and agree with it as well. So, for example, it's tricky for you to be there at 10:30, ready to jump onto a Zoom call for work, dressed ready for work. You've already got a lot of things done. You're in the zone, and then your teenager comes down at 10:30 in the morning looking for something for breakfast in a dressing gown. It doesn't work that way. The whole house has to be on the same sort of schedule, just as if you would have been if you're going out towards schools, jobs, etc. You keep the same routine and you run to it. That will give you more time. Believe me, it's a really good practice if you don't already have it. The next one when you're in work mode is to have a start your workday task. So this can be either just getting a glass of water or having a coffee or making a cup of tea or whatever it might be, but it's simply when you sit down, that's it, you're in work mode. Don't have open your laptop as a start your workday task, because if you open your laptop and the first thing you see is an email or something and you say, I told them that, and you try and get back into respond, you've already got into work mode on the wrong foot. You haven't actually had a chance to mentally say to yourself, I'm now going into work mode. You sit down, I'm going to start working. Because the intention is the biggest factor for success, being able to sort of switch channels in your brain easily and frequently when you're working from home makes it a lot easier from there. So have a start your day work task. And it can just be something that you'll do automatically, but you just label it in your head, this is my start of work task. And once you're doing this, you're at work. You can intentionally avoid distractions. There will always be unexpected things, but you try and make sure that you build distractions if you can that are known into your schedule. So for example, if you have doing homeschooling and you need to do some type of schoolwork, you know it's going to be there. It's going to be a known factor. Again, in your planning, you're going to do review schoolwork at 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. or whatever it might be. And that's the part you're going to do, or you do it at lunchtime or something like that. But you don't get taken away from your tasks that you're doing stuff when you're in work by other things that's required. So especially as well, if there's you're having difficulty doing things, you can basically use things like the Pomodoro technique, which is a time management technique. So you could sort of decide, I'm going to do 25 minutes of focused work. I'm going to take a 5-minute break. You set a timer on your phone, repeat that 4 times, and you got a big 2-hour work block to get things done. That's great if you've got lots of meaty tasks that you have to do, like presentations, got to file stuff, catalog stuff, create stuff, etc. That's a good way to do it there, to make sure you can decide, well, emails first, 10 to 12, focus work, and then you take a break, whatever it might be. So whatever will work for you, try and make sure that you block your time out, and that if you do have distractions that you can't avoid, you block them in as part of your break time as much as you can. As also, you need to try and set aside time to chit chat with colleagues. Because technology hasn't caught up yet with the situation of being able to keep, colleague, interpersonal relationships going, you need to create time for them. So use the tools you have, if it's Slack, WhatsApp, internally, Messenger, same time. Just, even in general, hey, how's everyone today? It can work well. If you are the team lead or something, it's easier for you to do it. If you're not, just do it anyway. There's no rule that says the supervisor has to be the person initiating. You can happily ask how everybody's doing, how things are, and just keep things going up, as you would have the water cooler moments as well. But you need to schedule them in and create the time for it. Otherwise, one end of the day will go to the other, and you'll realize you won't have spoken or chatted with a colleague apart from, have you got this, have you got that, whatsoever. Likewise as well, because there will be the concern that you don't have the I can see you FaceTime approach, and you need to try and make sure that you're following on what you're delivering. It's always good to try and as well schedule regular work-related check-ins with your boss or team members. So if you're the boss and you don't already have a one-on-one every week with each individual member of your team, 15-20 minutes, that's all it has to be, just to see how they're doing, how they're going with work, and how they're coping with things, schedule it. If you're not the boss, ask your supervisor or something for it as well, because it does make a big difference to make sure things are on track. Then what you'll usually find is that the barriers go down over a period of time, and it's easier to have these sort of conversations and discuss things, and things don't start going before they become a big problem. Again, you don't have that so much of an issue when you're all working together. You all usually collectively see the same thing in the same environment, but it's good to try and force that schedule has to be built in for currently if you're working from home. Some good practices for breaks is set and keep your breaks. So if you're going to decide you're going to have it 11 o'clock to 11:15 as your break time, that's it, you do it. And vice versa, 11:15, back you go, you're back on work again. Sometimes if you sort of have the habit of picking up your phone and you want to check your social media or read the paper or whatever it might be, very quickly sometimes it's the 10-15 minute break becomes 30-minute break, and that's not really fair otherwise. So make sure you keep your breaks to the time you have breaks for it. Build them into your schedule, and you make sure you take them. Next, try and use your breaks wisely. So, you can either do it to sort of stick on a load of laundry, if it's any good, or wash dishes, or whatever it might be. If you wish, just get away from the flipping computer and do something else. And as far as expectations with colleagues and stuff is concerned, that's your break time. You're not there. If somebody says, "Oh, where were you?" I was on a break. And people will understand because you set the house rules externally with your work team. That's okay. But you need to make sure that you don't be constantly looking at your machine from one end of the day to the other. You get away, give your eyes a break, give a bit of a stretch, go from there. The other part as well is that you can sometimes use creative ways to focus. So if you have to do the dishes in a dishwasher or a washing machine for laundry, stick on a load of laundry and then say, right, I'm going to focus now on get these things done. And as soon as the dishwasher goes bing, that it's done, I'll get out and I'll use a break time to empty it out from there. So there's different ways that work for different people. You don't always have to sort of stick it rigidly to a calendar. Do whatever might work for you. Make sure you take a lunch break. Even if you need to go out for errands or anything, just don't eat at the desk. So wherever your desk might be, especially if you have a tidy temporary type approach and you're using your kitchen table, don't eat at your desk. If you have to, go into the living room and have your snack, or switch off the laptop or cover up with something. Just make sure you get out of the work zone while you have your lunch. And as well, try and eat well if you can. It's a good practice because the fridge can be very tempting. The fridge is our friend, especially in lockdown. Or if you've had if things are not going well and you're having a bad day, you can't turn to a colleague and go blah, 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 like you could do in work. Normally, you have to you internalize a lot more. And it's like, argh! And then it's whenever things go really bad, calling and saying, "Come, have a cake, eat me. It'll make you feel better." So make it a conscious choice and intention that you'll try and balance things out as well as you possibly can, because especially in the current situation, trying to be as healthy as possible is a good thing to try and do. Next thing is a good practice for break time is to leave the house. If it's absolutely bucketing down, just step outside for a few minutes with the umbrella, walk around the garden or something, or not the garden itself, that'd be wet, but in the general area, just to physically get out of the house. And don't let a day go by without being outside for at least 5 minutes. you would be surprised, depending where you live, depending on the type of situation your home life is in and the work life is in, it can be very easy to go by one day to the next and you don't actually have set foot outside the house. Just get outside for a little bit to get a mental break for yourself. Last time, this is a top tip. Anybody who's on the interview talk would have seen this as well. Micro breaks are brilliant. And again, this is the mindfulness meditation blender exercise. So essentially, you do a quick check-in before you do a call or anything. And it's similar to what you would have told people in call centers, or what I've told people in call centers years ago, is to sort of smile and take a deep breath before you pick up the phone. So you're always answering with a smile, etc. Same sort of thing, but this is all around helping you a bit better. It's simply, before any activity, and especially if you, to no fault of your own, and with the best one in the world, you spent a long time in front of the laptop and you have to jump on a Zoom call or do something, just quickly take it 5-10 seconds to just check in with yourself to see what you can see, hear, taste, smell, and touch right now. So you have a mental break, short micro break before we go to the next piece of work. This is especially important if you're routinely going to be jumping from one call to the next as part of your role, because the call you may have left is completely different to the one you're about to take. And if you are not able to sort of take your brain out of it for even a short period of time, you can bring over hangovers from one to the other. And this is quite a handy thing to do as well if you find that you're getting a bit stressed for the day, or you haven't had a chance to vent or release or get around to shake things off. If you do need to jump on a Zoom call or something, the one thing you can rely on that works, you can work towards your advantage when you're working from home, is technical issues. So if you're a minute late logging into a Zoom call, blame technical issues. You might have just been simply there composing yourself, ready to give your full to the next conversation. Use it, take the time, and then just blame Zoom or blame connections, for etc. from there. The last thing before you log off again is to write out your list, the next day's list of work tasks. Always have a reward at the end of each day. Cup of tea, go for a walk, do something. Try and avoid any stimulant or addictive substances. I know it's painful to say that. It hurts me to say it as well. But it's a really bad habit to have a reinforcer that is addictive at the end of each day. And then, again, bed at a definite time. And the tip for this is you set an alarm for about 30 minutes before bedtime. So the same way that you would set an alarm to wake up, set an alarm so you know it's time to get ready to go to bed. And then you start your routine to wind down. If that's a case of putting the cat out or whatever, and cleaning up things from dinner or tidying or whatever it might be, you're getting the kids into sort of bath with those things, that starts your wind down routine. And then very quickly you'll find that your body will start slowing itself down, ready for bed, because it knows and it's queued up to the fact that when this happens, within an hour or so, I'll be heading to bed myself. And then again, try and get a minimum of 6 hours sleep, ideally 7 or 8. And then you rinse and repeat this every day until it becomes a habit. And you take what you like out of this and you leave what you don't. We need to try and make sure the habit works. Because treat this to your own schedule. And then remember, never apologize for something you have to do, so that you can keep healthy and you keep sane. So adjust and amend it to your ideal work day. If you have to plan out one step at a time, okay, there may be some people whose circumstances will allow them to write out the whole new schedule of what they want to do, and they can do a complete clean sweep and do it all the time. For most of us mortals, you pick one of them and you try and implement that, see how it goes, then pick the next one, implement that you think will work from it. You have to take it week by week and day by day. And remember, each day and each week is a reset button. So when the wheels fall off and you don't have a chance to do anything that you wanted to do, remember expectation and reality, and that's where the stress lives. Ignore it. That didn't work then, we'll try again the next day. And eventually it'll get there. Just keep rinsing and repeating until it becomes a habit. And don't have to say this oftentimes, just never apologize, because if you're doing it what you need to do to keep you healthy and sane, and your colleagues doing the same thing, and you're not dropping the ball for work-wise, 90% of the time, things will start getting better in terms of productivity and resources and what you do as your organization. So everybody wins. So it's a good thing to have. But the only thing is to have an intention and the honest conversation as a work group and a team to make sure that you're all on the same page. A quick bonus for calls, because I know that Andrew takes video calls, and this is part of making things work. So this will be about 5 minutes, and then we'll go to questions if anybody has it. For video calls, always make sure everybody has cameras on all at all times. If somebody has their name appearing and they don't have their video camera on, whoever's leading the meeting politely asks them to stick on their video cameras. Okay. I don't enforce it for training purposes for this because it's not fair and we don't work with people like that. But for meetings and team meetings that I'd have myself, the expectation is video cameras on at all times for Zoom calls. That allows the non-verbals like nods, shaking heads, etc., waving, all these things that you normally, these visual cues. And it also means that you need to listen a little bit less as well, and the presenter needs to project a little bit less because you have using all your senses to try and get the communication across. Remember what top you're wearing. Simple one. I had a black top on before this. I had to stick on this quickly because of the black chair. Make sure you can be seen against the background. If you use virtual backgrounds on Zoom, it's always good to change them often if you have, and it's a very good trick if you want to try and get a bit of culture going, a bit of crack going with their colleagues. Keeps it interesting, little mental lifts of just like funny backgrounds, etc. You can get them all free on internet by a quick Google. And especially if you're the boss or you're the supervisor, it can lighten the mood a little bit as well. It doesn't make you any less professional or good at your job. It just means you could show you have a bit of fun side and helps there. And it helps to loosen things up as well if people are finding themselves retreating into more formal lines of discussion because you don't have the general day-to-day stuff all the time. Video call etiquette. Never talk badly about anybody on a video call, especially if they've just hung up. And if somebody colleague tries to draw you in, just be evasive. Even if you personally think that person has been a jerk, don't say Jack. Just be evasive. No, whatever. Leave it be. If you just to be aware that a lot of people are getting caught out with this thing. We're just used to sometimes saying something, but you have to be aware that nobody can be completely 100% sure when somebody's off a video call. They kind of left it. A colleague could be recording it or something. You have no idea. Assume that you're on stage when you're using a Zoom call, okay? Even if Zoom itself says this is not being recorded, there's a load of free screen capture software that anybody with an internet can download and use to record the contents of the screen and audio. So especially dealing with clients or third parties, just be aware of that when you're doing calls. And also as well, online meetings can take longer, okay? Hands up here, mea culpa. They take longer sometimes than you will be in face-to-face. So try and stick to the time, he says, going over time. But let's move on quickly on that if you can. To make it stick, we've worked for the CATS business, we've used work from home for over a decade. So when we were hiring people and taking people on, a lot of therapists would be quite highly qualified, would have multiple degrees, they'd be quite experienced in their own field. They just could not hack the responsibility of being in charge of their own destiny. They wanted somebody to tell them what to do each step and spoon feed them, structure the day, be in charge of it, okay? The reason why I'm sharing this with you as well is that when you have the discussion with your supervisor about sort of trying to get a better chair, want to make working from home more permanent, it's highly likely, especially if they're a seasoned manager, they've been burnt in the past with somebody who's not up to it, okay? So you need to start from that assumption and then work forward. There's no way you can ask your supervisor if they have a brain in their head, they're going to say a flat out no if they've tried something before and somebody just completely messed things up and has caused them more hassle than that. Good. You have to start from that approach and make sure that you recognize that and go from there. In order to do that, you need to make sure you give a compelling business reason or service reason as to why it's important that you can work from home. You might need to think of it. If it's just a 50-50 reason and there's no real reason why, try and think outside the box and see is there anything else over and above the benefits you can offer. So this will be a case where you have to try and give and take to make it worth the while. They have to be easy for them to say yes. For example, back when I used to work in a blue chip company, I had about a 2-hour commute each day back and forth. It's probably longer now would have been longer now with traffic. But I basically had the agreement that I would try and split the difference and do an hour extra roughly every day work-wise and then had the extra hour for home time. And that seemed to work pretty well. And it was like a 50-50 for them. And the days I would have worked from home, I give the extra hour. So in reality, it was no big loss because it was a case of those sort of jobs you work to the job, not you don't work to your hours. So there was no real issue there, but it was a good way to try and split and think outside the reasons over and above. On number two, also you have to agree what the benefit is and keep track. Okay. And that's your responsibility to try and keep track, because if the benefit's going to be for you and your lifestyle and you want to do it, you need to make sure what the agreed benefits are. They have with your employer. When you're delivering, you need to make sure that you can demonstrate them and you have it. And again, as well, be honest. If things are working out well for you, give feedback. And if it's not working out well and there's issues, be honest and try and work on solutions. It does all come down to trust. Back in the days before video calls, I used to have somebody who worked for me in a support role who would work from home, and he was telling me quite happily that he used to get out of bed at 5 to 9 in the morning. He was a single guy, no real responsibilities or anything. He'd go onto his conference calls, again, in the days before Zoom calls. These days, he probably have to get up in the shower. But he'd get on the calls, work his day, then sort of wash up then and stuff and sort of make it look presentable in the evening about 6 or 7, head out in the town and have a nice time with his friends and things. And he was absolutely brilliant, or is absolutely brilliant. He was younger than me, so I presume he's still around. And not a problem, never an issue whatsoever. He would find bugs in code miles long. He'd spot things. He'd be proactive. Absolutely brilliant and delightful. Again, on the flip side, because I probably expect a flip side coming, I inherited an employee who was pestering to work from home when the job manifestly could not be done from home. And it turned out that they had basically got the job thinking that they would probably be able to try and sort of convince the boss to let them work from home for a while after he got to know the ropes. But, and in fairness to the guy, he was coming from Tipperary to Dublin, which was a hell of a journey every day. And I did sort of feel sorry for him. But at the end of the day, this was a case where the role physically was not possibly done from home. No matter how much pleading or I'm missing family time or sob stories, it's not going to cut out. You can't physically put a square peg into a round hole. So in this case, we made a plan. It was a large organization. There was lots of opportunities intercompany, so that the solution was found within about, say, 6 months to have train up somebody to do his role, and then we managed him over to a role then that he could do from home. And I was like, happy days for him. The new manager was happy. The new employee was happy that took over and came onto my team, and it worked well. But it was only done once we got the nonsense out of the way of him feeding a line that you could do this, that, and trying to manufacture reasons why it could be done. And we got to the bottom line fact because it became very apparent, no, all you're doing is loading extra stuff on your colleagues who are in the office, so that you have the luxury of not driving in. So it starts from a place of trust and honesty, and then you can build up from it. But you have to have the discussion. And again, that was one of the difficult type ones. And it'd be talking months, maybe sometimes years to get it done. But you have to have the conversation. Eventually, you're going to reach a stage where you'll be having a problem otherwise. So almost there. I want to keep it there. So quickly, the intention is the issue. Whether you desire you want to work from home or you have to work from home at the moment, your intention is how to make it work is what matters. Legislation is catching up and it's on your side. That's where you want to go for. But if you do decide you want to try and work more from home, and I think the majority of people on this one had said that, start the discussion now, because there may be times that you and your organization and your supervisors will need time to put things in place, and give them that time and make sure that everybody knows what to expect and what the levels of success are, and then it works out pretty well. I'm not going to leave you hanging because it's a bit tricky approach. They do have the weekly challenge, and that's just through my Facebook group if you wish. You can basically do each sort of step over a period of, let's say, 5 weeks and try and make these changes. It's sometimes a way to actually, it nags you to check that you're on board for it. You don't have to, you can. It's entirely down to yourself, but it's a option to make sure you start building these changes in if it's important to you. If it's not, that's absolutely fine. Again, you'll get the group, you get the code by here. It's in the chat. Send it to everybody. I'll just quickly share it again. And you can join the group anytime free up to the end of the year, so you can actually try and just check as well this. I also give the time management code course as well that corresponds with this. You can get a free copy of that and watch it at your leisure because it helps. Grab the link to access the group if you want to try the challenge. I would encourage you, if you do think that there's something here you want to make a difference on and that you want to change, doing it as a challenge will work because it'll force you to keep track on things and might bring you back to it. And also joining a group sometimes helps, so you can actually ask people questions how to find it. Otherwise, try it yourself and see what works for you and what doesn't. And I will then give you the rest of your afternoon back and hope you all have a lovely day. Okay.